The purpose of this video is to explain the 4 most common ways that we avoid convictions in speeding cases. Now, speeding offences must be some of the most common criminal offences that are committed, and everyone at some point in their lives will probably get a speeding ticket. So it's really important to understand your rights, your options, and some of the defences that might be available to you if you have been caught speeding. But let's cover the 4 most common ways that we avoid convictions in the speeding cases that we deal with. Now, I should start by saying that every speeding offence is completely different speeds, different equipment, different legislation that's being used. So if you do find yourself in a situation where you've been caught speeding, try and get some independent legal advice. Now, we do offer free initial advice to anyone who calls us. You'll find our contact details on our website. But let's get stuck into it then. The first way that we avoid convictions in speeding cases is with the NIP. Now, if you weren't pulled over by the police, the NIP should be issued within 14 days. If it's not issued within 14 days to the registered keeper of the vehicle, then the whole case may fail for that reason, because under the Road Traffic Act, it has to be sent within a certain time frame. So if you haven't received that and 14 days have passed, it may now be out of time. If you've received the NIP and you've got it in front of you, then just compare the date of the alleged offence to the date that you've received the NIP or the posting date. Sometimes these documents do fall outside of 14 days, often due to poor administration, miscommunication, or perhaps the police just not noticing that it's out of time. So if the NIP isn't received within 14 days, the case may fail for that reason. Now, in those circumstances, still complete the NIP, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're mistaken and you're then accused of failing to ID the driver. That's an offence that can carry 6 penalty points. So you can still complete the document, you can send that back, and you can still go on to challenge the allegation on the basis that the NIP wasn't sent within 14 days. Remember, it's for the police to prove this case against you, and that may also require them to provide evidence to prove that it was sent within 14 days. If you're not the registered keeper, then it's not going to be sent to you. It always goes to the registered keeper of the vehicle first. Now, if you lease your vehicle, whether it's a car or a van, it may go to the lease company. They might charge you a small administration fee just to deal with that document, and the police should then issue a separate NIP in your name. Now, I'm sometimes asked, well, is there then any time limit on how long the police have to issue the NIP in your name? They've got 6 months to prosecute you. Under section 127 of the Magistrates Court Act, for a summary only offence, the police must lay charges within 6 months. So if you don't receive anything within a 6 month time frame, you're normally in the clear. But always check that with the 14-day period. The second part of the NIP that I'd like to check is what's called the local traffic order. Now, the easiest way to explain what a local traffic order is to show you a copy of an NIP that we received in one case recently. Now, I'll read out various sections of the NIP that are important to really make this point. It says, in accordance with Section 1 of the Road Traffic Offenders Act, I hereby give you notice that it's intended to take proceedings against the driver of the motor vehicle for the alleged offence exceeds 60 mile an hour speed limit in contravention of a local traffic order, manned equipment travelling at 68 miles an hour at 9 o'clock on the 12th of September 2023 at A52 Twineshed Road, Curtin Home, United Kingdom, contrary to the above local traffic order and sections 84 and 89 subsection 1 of the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984 and Schedule 2 to the Road Traffic Offenders Act. Now, have you recognised the problem with the NIP? The police are, of course, required to tell you what offence you've committed. So you've received an NIP for committing a speeding offence. Now, that doesn't go far enough. The police have to pinpoint the exact piece of legislation that applies in your case. Now, different speed limits in force across England and Wales sometimes have local traffic orders, and that's where the local authority are in control, they're in charge of the speed limit that's in force in that particular stretch of road. The problem with this NIP is they haven't pinpointed, they haven't told us what the local traffic order is. They simply say, exceed 60 mile an hour speed limit in contravention of a local traffic order. Now, what it should say is exceed 60 mile an hour speed limit in contravention of, and then name the local traffic order. And you can tell from the wording of the NIP that it's meant to, because further down it says contrary to the above local traffic order. But there is no above local traffic order because they haven't named it. It's not identified on that document. Now, of course, you're entitled to know what offence you've committed. You're entitled to see a copy of the local traffic order. What happens if the police can't identify the correct local order, or they don't have a copy which can be provided. In some cases, they simply don't know what local traffic order applies in that particular case, and that would normally lead to the case against you failing. So it is a little bit tricky with local traffic orders because not every speed limit has to have a local traffic order in place. But again, that's why it's worth checking the NIP, because you'll see the words local traffic order on there. If the local traffic order has been named and has been identified, then you're well within your right to write back to the police and ask for a copy of that. But remember, you have 28 days to respond to the NIP. If you miss the 28-day deadline, there's a risk that you might be prosecuted for failing to ID the driver, and again, that's going to carry 6 points. Now for Mr. Stevens, that's going to be a problem because he'd go from 3 points for the alleged offence to 6 points for failing to ID the driver. So it makes sense in Mr. Stevens' case that he replies to the NIP within time, identifies himself as the driver of the vehicle, providing he was driving the vehicle at the time of the alleged offence, and we can go on and we can take up these issues with the police and the prosecution at a later stage. You may have also noticed on the NIP, it also appears to be out of time as well. So this case should be dropped without too much trouble. Now, the second thing to check in any speeding case is signage. Now, everyone knows what a speed sign looks like. Whether you're in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, 40, 50, 60, national, there's always different signs to make it clear to drivers what the speed limit is on that particular stretch of road. But what if the signs are not compliant, and what if the signs are not clear? Now, there's two different types of speed sign. A terminal sign, which introduces the speed limit. You'd normally see them at the start of a new road, you're going from one road to another, or if the speed limit changes. And they're the larger signs to make it clear to motorists that are passing through that the speed limit has now changed. And you then have repeater signs. They're the small signs that will display the speed limit, and they're normally fixed on lampposts, and they're not always as clear as the terminal signs. Now, of course, it's for the local authority to keep on top of signs, to make sure that signs are clear to drivers. Because what if the signs are not clear and therefore you're not aware that the speed limit has changed? Whether it's a 30 down to a 20 or higher speed, you've got to know that the speed limit has changed. Now, there may be other clues and other factors which will help you decide if the speed limit has changed, but for the most part, drivers are going to pay attention to the signs. And there's various reasons why the signs may not be compliant. If there's overgrown hedges or overgrown trees that will cover signs, if signs have been defaced or graffitied, if road workers have failed to fix signs properly, the sign has moved around or shifted position and therefore it's not clear. There's different reasons why the signs may not be compliant, and therefore you may not be guilty of the offence. Now, it's also quite an interesting argument to raise, because if I'm challenging a speeding case on signage, realistically the only way the police can prove that the signs are adequate is to provide photos. Now, sometimes the police will try and rely on Google Earth or Google Street View to show that signs are compliant. But the problem there is that they don't know when the photos were taken for Street View purposes. So the Street View may show that stretch of road 6 months earlier or 12 months earlier. Of course, the road layout may have changed since then. Signs may have been taken down. Speed limits may have changed. So it's not good enough, in my view, for the police to try and rely on Google Earth or Google Street View, and that wouldn't and shouldn't be admissible in a criminal case. So the only way realistically they can prove this is a site visit. Now it begs the question, are the police going to dedicate that much time, energy, resources to what might be a minor speeding offence, to send 1 or 2 police officers whilst on duty to a location where a speeding offence may have been committed, and then start taking photos of all the signs? In my experience, and in most cases, the police just don't bother because it's not realistic to expect them to do so. But they've got to prove the case, and they've got to prove that the signs were adequate, and where they can't do that, the case against you should fail. Now, the final thing to consider is calibration. Every camera has to be set up, maintained, calibrated in a certain way, whether it's a handheld camera, an automatic camera, and there's strict rules in place as to how often these machines have to be calibrated, serviced, etc. So if you're being caught speeding, first of all try and check what device you've been caught speeding with. It may not be clear in the NIP, it may just say it's a manned camera, like the NIP that I showed you earlier. You can sometimes check online what speed camera exists at that precise location where you were caught speeding. But one reason why it can be a really effective way of challenging a speeding case, and it's really similar to the reason we challenge cases on signage, it's because it's sometimes more hassle than it's worth for the police to have to go away and dig out calibration records, maintenance logs, service logs to show that a camera has been set up in the right way, to show that a camera has been calibrated, to show that a camera is type approved for use in these kind of cases. It's a lot of work for a very busy police force, and if they can't provide that kind of evidence in time when the court tells them to, then they may be prevented, stopped from using that against you. Now clearly in a case where they've got to prove the calibration of the camera, if they're stopped from using calibration records, how can you be convicted? It can be very, very difficult for the police to work around that situation. So it's really about challenging the case in the right ways and for the right reasons, but at the same time slowing things down and trying to cause some practical problems for the police and for the prosecution service in cases like these. So just to recap, if you've received an NIP, then just check the wording of the NIP. If the local traffic order is named, you might be able to find that online. If it's not named, please get in touch. We'll explain how we approach that situation. Likewise, if the NIP is out of time, if you think it might be out of time, then again, we can explain how to deal with that. Secondly, local traffic orders. Can they identify the appropriate local traffic order? Can they provide copies of that local traffic order as well? Thirdly, signage. Are the signs adequate? Are they correct? And are they sufficient? And finally, calibration of any particular speed equipment that's been used, whether it's a laser device, a handheld device, or whether it's an automatic camera. So there's a lot to get stuck into with speeding offences, and we're going to cover these different offences over the next few weeks in various videos that we'll be releasing. But if you have got more information about your case and you want to discuss a particular speeding offence, then get in touch, we'll be happy to help.